for me to be here, and my talk will be on hypophosphatemia and ICU. It's my disclosure, and first of all, I would like to take a few seconds on the definition, because most of the time, phosphorus, phosphorus, and phosphate are used by clinicians, as well as me, interchangeably, also very related. They design or they refers to different conditions. For example, phosphorus refers to relating or containing phosphorus. Phosphorus, as you know, it comes from phos in Greek light, and phorus, that's barrier. It's a chemical element that symbol P and atomic number 15, and was discovered by Henning Brunt. It was very, very interesting to know how it was discovered. It was in 1669. Brunt was a German alchemist, and he was searching the philosopher's stone, a substance able to transform metal into gold or silver. And for that, he boiled his own urine. And what he saw is a material was very white and glowed in the dark. It was a phosphor. And as you know, but it's very important to notice that and to be very strict on this point, is that the phosphorus by itself does not exist in biological system. And what we found in biological system is phosphate. And phosphate is an inorganic molecules containing 4 oxygen atoms and a central phosphorus atom. 80% of the phosphate, the body phosphate, is in the bone, it serves as a reservoir, and 15% in the soft tissue and less than 1% in extracellular fluids. Because high concentration of phosphate can be toxic, the body decided to store all the phosphate into the bone, and perhaps this is one of the explanation because we have some bones. Sorry, some as well. Phosphate serves as a structural component for nucleic acid, adenosine triphosphate, phospholipid of membrane, also plays a critical role in cellular signaling and is for sure essential for life. Just precision that units, when you talk about phosphate, you can use millimole per liter or milligram per deciliter. It's not the same if you refer to phosphate. I explain. Millimole per liter, it's a numeric concentration values, and when you express phosphor and phosphate in millimole per liter, you can use phosphate alternatively because it's the same. Both molecules contain 1 mole of phosphorus, but phosphate values in milligram per deciliter is 3.1 times higher the phosphorus value in milligram per deciliter, because the molar mass of phosphate is 3 times the molar mass of phosphorus. It's just a detail, but just to be precise. The phosphate homeostasis is maintained by a delicate balance between GI absorption, urinary excretion, and also exchanges between intracellular and extracellular compartment. PTH, parathyroid hormone, as well as fibroblast growth factor 23 plays a crucial role in regulating phosphate level in the blood. When serum phosphate decrease, when hypophosphatemia occurs, then you will have some clinical complications. And clinical complications related to hypophosphatemia are mainly related to impaired energy metabolism, leading to cell dysfunction in multiple organs. For example, it has been reported that patients with hypophosphatemia can develop acute hemolytic anemia related to very profound ATP concentration, intracellular ATP concentration decrease. And if you consider this patient was a report in New England Journal of Medicine decades ago, shortly after the creation of hypophosphatemia, red cell ATP level rose, red cell rigidity decreased, and red cell survival improved. It was a direct consequence of hypophosphatemia correction. Respiratory muscles can also be affected by hypophosphatemia. Here's again a report from New England Journal of Medicine decades ago showing the transdiaphragmatic pressure in response to electrical stimulation before and after hypophosphatemia correction. After hypophosphatemia correction, you see an increase in transdiaphragmatic pressure for the same identical electrical stimulation. The links with a clinical patient, especially in ICU, is not so clear. There is conflicting data on how hypophosphatemia can affect weaning and induce potential mechanical ventilation. Recent study showed negative data on that. Hypophosphatemia can also affect cardiac function. Again, a New England Journal of Medicine decades ago reporting that a patient with a very low serum phosphate concentration show decreased cardiac contractility, and after phosphate infusion aimed at correcting serum phosphate level, the author report an increase in stroke work at the same lower wedge pressure, meaning an increase in myocardial contractility. Again, in ICU, the French study published in Intensive Care Medicine some years ago reported the effect of hypophosphatemia supplementation, phosphate supplementation in hypophosphatemia patient. And if you look at the cardiac index here, you will see that even if the cardiac index was not very low at the beginning, cardiac index increased in response to hypophosphatemia correction in ICU patient. It's not a rare condition. This is from my hospital, it's a small hospital in Paris, 700 beds, in which in 1 year I asked for the biologist to tell me how many hypophosphatemia was diagnosed from a biological point of view in 1 year. Almost 1,800 samples show hypophosphatemia in 900 patients during 1 year in my hospital. And we know from a retrospective study, included a large, many patients, it was 10,000 patients in hospital, and those studies show that in fact hypophosphatemia is a rare condition but is associated with increased mortality. And in these studies, the risk factors were alcohol abuse, sepsis, and also patients who were malnourished. In ICU, the incidence of hypophosphatemia is higher, almost 24% in this study, and mainly during the first day of the ICU, after the ICU admission. So most of the patients develop hypophosphatemia during the first day after ICU admission. And exactly as a hospitalized patient, critical ill patient who develop hypophosphatemia in ICU had increased mortality rate. And the more severely is the hypophosphatemia, the lower is the phosphate serum concentration, the higher is the mortality. And clearly, if you look at the survival curve here, you will see that compared to normophosphatemic patient with hypophosphatemia have an increased rate or mortality. However, after adjusting on illness severity, there is no hypophosphatemia is no an independent risk factor for mortality. So low phosphate in critical patient is probably more a marker of illness severity rather than an independent contributor to or to directly cause mortality in patients. The causes. There are three main explanation causes: decrease in intestinal absorption, internal redistribution, respiratory alkalosis, for example, catecholamine, lactic cell uptake, and also increased renal excretion. It has a clinical situation in ICU that can present a decrease in phosphate serum level. It could be septic patient, postoperative state, trauma patient, fluid therapy. It could be also acid-base disorder, respiratory alkalosis, metabolic acidosis. It could be also medication, catecholamine, diuretic, glucose, insulin. But there is some also specific condition and situations such as refeeding syndrome. You know, refeeding syndrome, it's a very, very old entity. It was already described by Émile Zola, who is a famous French writer, in La Débacle, who is a French book. And when he talked about the French soldier who fasted for a long period of time, and when the French soldiers were fed, he described that Saturday the famine ceased, night fell, we were still eating, and we ate until the next morning, and many died out. This is probably refeeding syndrome. There is other description, historical description of refeeding syndrome. And during the 80s, it was very interesting to note that the links, the relationship between refeeding syndrome and hypophosphatemia has been made. describing clinically malnourished but very stable patients who were given aggressive total parenteral nutrition support and rapidly followed by acute pulmonary decompensation, severe hypophosphatemia, and at the end, death. And probably is a perfect description of refeeding syndrome, leading to a transfer from the extracellular compartment to the intracellular compartment of phosphate due to the refeeding. More recently, David blames a geriatrist who experienced a very prolonged period of fasting, 44 days in a cage here. Weight loss was 24 kilograms, and the BMI dropped from 29 to 21. And despite very careful monitoring of the refeeding at the hospital, when the energy intake increased, the serum phosphate decreased markedly, despite close monitoring, and this the evolution of the serum phosphate concentration after phosphate infusion. The explication is here. During the fasting, the metabolism is modified, and at the refeeding, there is a very important increase in insulin concentration, leading to the transfer of potassium phosphate and magnesium from the extracellular space to the intracellular space. Renal replacement therapy is also contributors to hypophosphatemia in ICU and increased renal expression too. This is a very, very nice study showing that in critically ill patients with hypophosphatemia, phosphate factors did not differ between hypophosphatemic patient and non-hypophosphatemic patient. Meaning that even if there is an increase in the phosphatemia expression in critical ill patients, there is probably another cause that may explain this phenomena, other cause than modifying of phosphate factors. And the study from Stéphane Caudry present here, showing that like all other studies, not specific to his study or his patient, but in all studies on RRT, showing that in patient under CRT, there is a decrease in serum phosphate level. What can we do? We can replace the phosphate, so we can administer, we can infuse phosphate in those patients. There is no precise protocols. It's a very nice review, recently published in Critical Care, analyzing the different protocols that have been described to replace phosphate in the body. Those is up to 45 millimole, infusion rate to 75 millimole per hour, so very, very high. And also a very nice study showing that compared to a physician-driven regulation, it's probably better to use a protocol-driven regulation. It was a protocol based on patient actual weight and also the phosphate level. And using this protocol in this before-after studies, the authors reported increase in the success of phosphatemia treatment. My conclusion is that in critical patients, there is a very high prevalence and incidence of hypophosphatemia due to the multiple different factors. Hypophosphatemia may lead to multiple symptoms, including, as we show, cardiac and respiratory failure associated with high mortality, even if we are not completely sure that there is a direct link. There is no causality, but more an associative relationship. In ICU, refeeding syndrome, acid base disorders, as well as medication increased renal excretion may cause hypophosphatemia. And also multiple studies confirm the efficacy and safety of intravenous phosphate administration. Today, there is no protocol on many protocols can be used to replace phosphatemia. Thank you very much for your attention.